Hi friends, welcome to the Nationalist View, and I am your host Arun Anand. And with me today is a very special guest, Dr. Eytan Cohen. Uh, Dr. Cohen, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking out from your busy schedule.
Thank you
And
very much for having me.
yeah, thank you. And Dr. Cohen is a distinguished scholar of Turkish politics and regional strategy. He is a research fellow at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. He is also associated with Moshe Dayan Center, Tel Aviv University, and he's co-editor of Turkey Scope and author of a very fantastic book called The Evolution of the Turkish School Textbooks from Ataturk to Erdogan. We are going to mention we are going to give the link of this book, so from where you can buy it online in the description box also. This is not a promotion, but this is a book worth reading for anybody who basically wants to understand Turkey. So, and his work over the years has offered deep insight into Turkey's ideological trajectory, civil military relations, and foreign policy realignment, especially under President Erdogan. And in today's episode, we are going to discuss how Turkey's growing influence from Syria to South Asia reflects its Neo-Ottoman ambitions, how it navigates its paradoxical role within NATO, and why it remains still central to the US strategy despite deep contradictions, and what does it mean for Israel and Middle East. My first question, Dr. Cohen, is that you had recently, written an article, and in which I'm to quote basically that you said, that Ankara wants to turn the Syrian army into the long arm of Turkey in the region. So, if you can elaborate on this a little bit and how this strategy fits into President Erdogan's broader vision of regional dominance and Neo-Ottoman influence.
Okay, so first of all, allow me to thank you very much for this wonderful introduction. I'm not taking it for granted. And and yes, thank you very much for this wonderful stage. And I just wanted to say hi to India. I've been to your country and I have only wonderful memories. I just wanted to say this in the beginning. And regarding your question, regarding the Turkish politics and, of course, the Turkish penetration in Syria. Well, in the aftermath the fall, in the aftermath of the fall of the Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad, we witnessed that Turkey began to fill the vacuum that was found there. There we had Iran and Russia, and since Bashar al-Assad was ousted, so Turkey began and managed to fill the vacuum that it found in Syria. So uh, this current government of Ahmed al-Shara or al-Julani is under very high Turkish influence. Turkey has a geographical contiguity, and it's a neighbor of Syria, and some portions of Syria are still under Turkish occupation. So it's not a secret that the Turks are providing almost every kind of infrastructural needs of this new administration. By the way, this Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, was considered as a terrorist organization uh, by by the Europeans. But after the fall of Assad, we have seen that the brand new tie and the jacket of Mr. El Julani turned him from Julani to Ahmad al-Shara, to a statesman. And this legitimization was done by the Turks. We all know that the first ever foreign visit that was conducted in Damascus was the head of the Turkish intelligence agency, Ibrahim Kalin. And later we have seen the first ministerial visit was carried out by the Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, and the first ever embassy that was inaugurated in Syria is again the Turkish embassy. So the Turks are working very hard to lift all of the sanctions. Of course, they most of the sanctions are lifted already because of the also Turkish efforts. Turkey is paving the way of many different European countries into Syria. Obviously, when we are looking at the history of Syria, you will be able to see that the Americans could never penetrate in Syria. Let us see in 1918, at the end of the First World War, who was in Syria? The French. Later, we had the so-called Syrian, independent state, but under the influence of the Soviets, then the Russians, and then Iranians. And now, for the first time, we are seeing a member of NATO, which is considered as a friendly country towards the West slash the United States, is now becoming, the dominant force behind the scenes. So this dominant force behind the scenes is paving the way of the Americans and of the other European actors into Syrian territory, and therefore also the Americans and also the Europeans who are very much interested of getting rid of their own Syrian refugees. They want a stable Syria. They want to send these Syrians back to Syria, and therefore they want to see the reconstruction of Syria. How you gonna do this reconstruction of Syria? You need stability. How you gonna do it? You need to have a functioning proper government. So now they are seeing that this guy, Ahmed Ashara, is functioning there, even if he is conducting such, atrocities against the Alawites or the Druze. The Europeans are just, they only want to concentrate to the bottom line of getting rid of the Syrian refugees. They want a stable Syria, and therefore they tend to ignore all of these negativities that they had to, respond. But they prefer to ignore it. Okay, and therefore we can say also we should not forget what is going on in Ukraine, and together with Russia. The Europeans are very much disturbed by Russia, and they see Russia as an existential threat. And therefore, they see Turkey as a partner, because if they are not going to embrace Turkey as a partner, so they may lose Turkey to the Russian camp, Russian Chinese camp. You also wanted to mention the Pakistani Chinese axis, so this is very much also related. Why is it important? Because Syria is also connected very much with Russia, because the Russians were there. Why Bashar al-Assad was toppled? I just want to remind you, it's because of two core reasons. The first reason is the Russians were too busy with the Ukrainian war, so they could not function there as they wanted to function. And the second one, which is not less important from that, because of the decisive Israeli victory against Hezbollah terrorist organization. I assume that most of our audience, they do remember the beepers, right? The beepers which exploded in the hands of the terrorists, which basically neutralized thousands of terrorists in real time, in the same time, right? So Hezbollah's terrorists were neutralized. In the past, we know that Hezbollah terrorists were considered as the most important reinforcements of Assad's forces. So all the stars aligned, and Al Julani and his gang, they could overthrow the government, and they could form here a legitimate government in Syria because of the Western blessing, because they also want a stability in Syria, and they also want, and let me say, an industrial peace, an industrial silence vis-a-vis Russia. And therefore, now they also provide Turkey the Eurofighter jets, because they need Turkey for their defense of the southeastern flank of NATO, which is very important for the European countries. If they are not going to provide Turkey these kind of ammunition or these kind of high technology goods, Turkey is capable of causing them headache. This is the first issue. I would like to remind you that in 2020, Turkey opened its borders to conduct an influx of refugees into the European territory. The Greek-Turkish border, witnessed very hard days. Many Afghan, Pakistani, Palestinian refugees, they tried to cross the border from the Turkish side to the European side, and it caused, very, unpleasant pictures for the Europeans, for the first and foremost for the Greeks. So, long story short, Syria is not only Syria. Okay, so Syria is a piece of something much more bigger. When we are seeing the Turkish penetration in Syria, we can basically also, I mean, this Turkish penetration is in Syria is pushing us to an angle that we have to look at a larger picture. Today, the Turks are in Iraq, in Syria, in northern Cyprus, in Libya, in Qatar, in Somalia, and of course, naturally, they are also present in the Eastern Mediterranean because they have a shore there, right? The longest shore in the Eastern Mediterranean belongs to Turks. Long story short, when we are seeing this, activities beyond Turkey's borders, we understand that the current Turkish administration is not interested in to act within its own boundaries, but rather they want to expand their reach. And when I'm looking at Erdogan's statements, Erdogan is saying, in a very open way that you cannot imprison Turkey within its boundaries. Turkey is much bigger than Turkey. Okay, this is the end of the quote. So the people who are the analysts who are analyzing Turkey, there are two schools. One school is saying that this is Neo-Ottomanism. Of course, I'm going to define it for our audience. What is Neo-Ottomanism? And there is another, school that it is saying, no, 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 this is not Neo-Ottomanism, but this is a very, proactive foreign policy. I must admit that I'm from the first school. I believe that this is, the fundamentals of the Turkey's penetration in the Middle East, in the Balkans, in the Caucasus, is is derived from its Neo-Ottoman foreign policy. So, first of all, let us define what is Neo-Ottomanism. Neo-Ottomanism is an ideology which is seeking to revive the influence, the Turkish influence, in the ex-territories of the Ottoman Empire, which means that if you're going to look at Balkans, Northern Africa, Middle East, Caucasia, okay, the basin of Black Sea, and of course Eastern Mediterranean. From a historical point of view, yes, these areas indeed belonged to the Ottoman Empire. But today, in these areas, we have new nation states, and these nation states are not very much interested in living under the Ottoman Empire. The fact that the close circles to the government, the Turkish government, they don't like this Neo-Ottoman phrase is not because they don't like their Neo-Ottoman, heritage or legacy, because they understand that in some of the countries in the region, especially in the Arab states, the image of Ottomans are not so positive. So if they are going to emphasize this term of Neo-Ottomanism, they may see a backfire. It may backfire against them. So The Turkish administration, in an official term, they are not using this term of Neo-Ottomanism, but when you are looking at the practices and when you're looking at the quotations of the, and of course, statements of the Turkish administration members like president, foreign minister, and others, you'll see the existence of this Neo-Ottoman ideology. In the state protocols, you may see the presidential guards who are, wearing the traditional Turkish, Ottoman, Seljuk, and other states and empires uniforms. And besides that, in from time to time, we are seeing the Ottoman military band marches in official ceremonies, etc. And Erdoğan, obviously he is referring to the Ottoman history very often. So I don't think that they are ashamed of it. No, they are not ashamed of it. On contrary, they are very much proud of it. But they understand that it may backfire in some cases, so they want to make this Ottoman thing much more low profile. Long story short, Turkish penetration in Syria is also backed, for instance, by the Ottoman Land Registry archive documents to justify the Turkish presence there. They are making some comparisons, let's say with the Russians or with the Americans or with any other foreign actor which is intervening in Syria. They are saying they are really outsiders, but Turkey is not an outsider. We return to the homeland of our ancestors. And if you need to see, if you need to see an evidence, so please look at the Ottoman registry documents. So we will see more and more increasing Turkish presence in Syria and influence in Syria. Recently, according to the Israeli media, we are seeing that because of the Turkish pressure, the Syrian Al Julani government will, launch a diplomatic initiative to push Israel to withdraw from the Israeli Golan Heights. It would be something unthinkable from our perspective to give these very strategic hills to an ex-Al Qaeda terrorist. Okay, so obviously after October the 7th, Israel will not going to do such a strategic mistake. So therefore, we can understand the Turkish strategy. This Turkish strategy is they are doing everything possible to create a friction between Jerusalem and Damascus. They don't want to see any kind of even a security deal between the two countries because at the end, if there will be a friction between Ankara and Jerusalem, the most important winner of this friction will be Turkey because then Damascus would be sorry, I will rephrase my words. If there will be a friction between Damascus and Jerusalem, then the biggest winner will be Ankara because Damascus will need more military equipment, more, high-tech, let's say UAVs or other important ammunitions and let me say like tanks, armored vehicles, etc. So Turkey will be the one who will provide the new Syrian government all of these goods. So at the end, it is creating the necessary atmosphere, necessary, infrastructure to provide all these goods to the Syrian government, and therefore we see that the Turks are signing collaboration agreements and training agreements with the Ministry of Defense of Syria. So in the end, I can tell you that I personally I personally see and expect an increasing Turkish penetration in Syria, and it's not done yet because at the end, the Israeli government and the Syrian government still did not pen here, they did not sign here a security agreement. So time will tell what will happen. But I assume that Turkey and Israel will continue their chess game on this chessboard called Syria, and Israel will do everything possible in order not to allow the Turkish armed forces to station in its vicinity. This is very crucial for Israel.
So, Dr. Cohen, overall, if you look at the growing influence of Turkey, especially after the fall of the Shia crescent, there seems to be after the fall of the what you call the Shia crescent, after Iran was pummeled by Israel and US forces, and after you destroyed, kind of almost Israel decimated, Hezbollah, and to some extent, to a large extent, Hamas also. But now we see, there seems to be a paradoxical situation that, on one hand, Turkey is nurturing the Islamists. On the other hand, it is backed by the Western. Turkey is also having a close alliance with China, and we all know basically the relationship between the West and the China, and especially US and China. So they're not what we may call the best of the relations, or they're not at least allies, they're adversaries. So how do you explain this, and what does it mean for, especially if we look at the larger picture, the growing influence of Turkey? What does it mean for, Israel if we look at overall the regional security metrics, and what does it mean for overall the Middle East?
Okay. So this is a very complicated question. On one hand, Turkey, of course, is a member of NATO, and you know, you know that Israel is a country which is perceived in the Western camp, even if Israel is not a member of NATO. So Israel basically does not see itself threatened from the NATO countries. But Turkey is an exception here. Turkey, even if it's a NATO country, from time to time, even if it's in rhetoric, we see sometimes that the Turkish officials, especially Erdoğan himself, has threatened Israel. He openly said that whatever we did to Libya and to Nagorno-Karabakh, we would also do it against Israel. So I only want to remind what he did to Nagorno-Karabakh and Libya. He provided ammunition, UAVs, and other important armored vehicles that changed the rules of the game both in Libya and both in Nagorno-Karabakh, the war between Azerbaijan and Armenia. So I can definitely tell you that on one hand, it's a good news for Israel that Turkey is in NATO, because in the end we tend to think that a member of NATO will not going to launch a war against us. But on the other hand, we see this state is, adopting a very ambivalent stance vis-à-vis Israel. On one hand, it is a member of NATO. We have diplomatic relations, but its attitude towards the Jewish state is very hostile. So the fact that Turkey is a member of NATO is also causing a problem for Israel at the end, because it's making things much more complicated. On the other hand, it's also good for Israel because if you are a member of NATO, you cannot get married with Russia and China. And therefore, you cannot become a member of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Or thanks to or because of India, Turkey is not being able to become a member of the BRICS. Okay, we all know that it's because of India or thanks to India, whatever you would like to mention it. And as a result, we see that the Turkish foreign policy is based on this term, ambivalence. They are trying to maximize their own interests. You know, if you like, I will do a metaphor. They are dancing in two different weddings at the same time. Okay? They are also in the wedding of NATO, and also we see them in the summits of Shanghai Cooperation Organization or BRICS, etc., with the leaders of the Russians and the Chinese. Um, so they are trying to give here an impression that uh, their foreign policy is an independent foreign policy, and if their national interest dictates them to take action for the West, so they are doing it, and if not, they may also support the other camp as well. So where is the catch here? I mean, what is the problematic nature of this behavior? You know, if we were talking about any other state, we most likely would see that the United States or the European countries would punish these kind of actions. But Turkey, because of its geopolitical location, and because of its huge market. Because at the end, the Europeans and the Americans are also doing business with this country. And there is a huge, you know, cheap labor for them. And it's a huge market. We are talking about like 85 million people. Okay? So if you're going to punish this country, obviously you would push this country to the arms of the other camp. And you don't want to strengthen the other camp by pushing this country to their arms. Okay? So, in the end, Turkey is doing many red flagged actions, but they keep see that the West is incapable or reluctant to punish them. And therefore, they continue with their current stance because, in the end, they do see that they can really maximize their own interests, even if it is against the pure Western interests. So, therefore, we see that Turkey, from time to time, is conducting a rapprochement towards China, Russia, and obviously we also see that there is an ideological bond between Turkey and Pakistan. Erdoğan himself uh, is considered as a kind of a representative of the Muslim Brotherhood ideology in Turkey. And if we are talking about Muslim Brotherhood ideology, so we have to speak about the Islamic solidarity. And there is a very important bond between Turkey and Pakistan. And in the recent clashes between India and Pakistan, the Turkish support was very open to Pakistan, and we also saw that even the um, Indian military personnel declared it in their press conference that some of the UAVs and other weapons and other components that were used during the clash were provided by Turkey to Pakistan. So, on the other hand, you know, if we're gonna look at this big picture, uh, you know, it's like a chess game. But if we are seeing Turkey and Pakistan together, on the other hand, we see Israel and India are coming together, and obviously, you know, similar to them, we share the same values with our Indian friends. We really cherish our relationship with India, and we really think that our relationship is crucial, also for you and also for us. And these relationships should be deepened not only because of this Turkish Pakistani rapprochement, but rather, really, I think our destiny is, it should be both countries should cooperate as much as they can to maximize their own interests because we are facing these, I mean, the same kind of challenges. So, as I said, Turkey is a very complicated country. Uh, from Israeli perspective, we did not sign a peace treaty with Turkey in order to have proper relations. There were never declaration of hostilities between the two countries. In Israel, unfortunately, we have many enemies, and we are not interested in another enemy in this long list. So this is also my personal view, but this is also, as far as I see, the view of the Israeli government and society, that Israelis and the Israeli state is not looking for a confrontation with Turkey. Israel is not interested in wars. Unfortunately, October the 7th was a war that was, declared against us. So we had
Thrusted
no
upon
choice.
Israel. It was thrusted upon, it was imposed on basically.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, our borders were breached, our people were killed, our people were kidnapped, and our women were raped, right? At the end, we did not launch an attack against Lebanon, but the Lebanese Hezbollah, they decided to to identify themselves with the Palestinians and with Hamas. They began to launch rockets against us the day after. Later, we have seen the Houthis in Yemen. Later, we have seen the Hashd Sha'bi terrorists in Iraq. And also, there were some rocket launch attacks from Syria. And we all know that who stood behind all of these mechanism. It was the Iranians, the head of the snake, and Israel had no choice. But within time, one by one, it defeated their each of its enemies. If we are seeing today that we are not talking, I mean, today Yahya Sinwar is dead. Ismail Khania is dead. Hassan Nasrallah is dead. The Houthi chief of staff and the rest of the government are eliminated. The same is applicable almost for the Iranians. All of the Iranian, I mean, two chiefs of staff, one after the other, and other senior generals of the Iranians were eliminated. I mean, these are, and obviously, we should also speak about the superiority of the Israeli intelligence and the Israeli air forces, that it had the full control of the Iranian skies. I mean, this is an unbelievable success. The depth of the Israeli intelligence and the surgical operations of the Israeli air forces. I think this must be appreciated, and the same is also applicable for the Israeli air forces operations in Yemen. I mean, these places are not around the corner. They are very, very far away from Israel, but still Israel is capable of doing it. So, long story short, this war, at the end of this war, maybe not in the beginning, but at the end of this war, Israel proved that it is a very important regional player, and it is the strongest region. It is the strongest country in terms of military and intelligence in the region. And even if we are capable of defeating our enemies, we do not want to add another enemy to that list. So the fact that we defeated Iran does not mean that Israel is looking for a fight with another country like Turkey. No. But we should also not forget that Turkey, unfortunately, is adopting very hostile stance against the state of Israel. They are hosting Hamas terrorists. They are taking part in South Africa's, you know, false accusations against Israel in Hague, in the ICJ, International Court of Justice. Besides that, Turkey is imposing economic sanctions and maritime sanctions against Israel. So we are seeing here lots of negative unilateral actions that all of these actions should be undo. They have to make a U-turn. Otherwise, we cannot speak about, otherwise, we will not be able to speak about a kind of a normal relationship between the two countries. So nowadays, we are seeing that there is a ceasefire, a so-called ceasefire. They are trying to hunt down our soldiers and they want to turn this period as a kind of a war of attrition. But after 2 years of fight, we would like to look at the future with a hope that Donald Trump will be able to deliver his most important promise. It is the demilitarization of the Hamas terrorist organization. But when we are acquiring the demilitarization of Hamas, we are not naive people. We will not be able to, Israel will not be able to pave the way of Turkey to Gaza. Israel did not fight to pave Turkey's way to Gaza. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, they fought for 2 years, but it's not for that. So this deal, we have no choice, but it should be modified, and time will tell what will happen.
So thank you, Dr. Cohen, for taking time out from your busy schedule, and we hope to host you back soon. And to our viewers, I'm again mentioning we're going to mention the link of the book which Dr. Cohen has written, and will keep on tracking geopolitics and especially Turkey and China. So these are the two core countries which we track very closely, and also on our podcast channel, we also track basically the global Islamist forces very closely and try to unpack them with experts like you. Thank you so much again, Dr. Cohen.
Thank you. It was my
Hope-
pleasure.
And we hope to host you, back again soon. And thank you, viewers, for watching. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again. Namaste.